Are you an atheist?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Are you an atheist?
I am. Yeah, I'm an atheist.
Yes, I am.
Alex, do you believe in God's existence?
No, I do not.
How long have you been an atheist?
I would say probably since I was about 15 years old.
So you don't believe in the existence of God?
No, not really.
What happened when you were 15?
I started questioning things, and I really just started to think about the logic behind everything.
Welcome to the Atheist Delusion video course. I'm Ray Comfort, and I'm with two of my favorite friends, Mark Spence and Emil Easy Zwain. We're seeing a revival in atheism. Literally millions of young people are becoming atheists, and this should be of great concern to every Christian. Why? Because an atheist, by his definition, by his lifestyle, cuts himself off from the message of everlasting life. So we're going to study very closely atheism and how to witness to atheists. By the way, the Pew Research Center said the share of Americans who identify as atheists has roughly doubled in the past several years.
Yeah, and you can feel it. You know, even this morning I was talking to one of our staff members who brought in a stack of atheist books that he read before he came to Christ in high school and then into college. Right. And you're seeing this sort of resurgence take place. I just want to say something real quickly about what Haley said, who we're going to hear from a little later, the young lady on the video. It's interesting that she said that one of the things that contributed to her becoming an atheist was when she started to think about the logic behind everything. Yeah, right. And I thought, wait a minute. You're thinking about logic, which should lead you to think that there's a logic giver, and yet that caused you to abandon logic. And so one of the things we want to do in this course is to really put that to the atheists that we care about and love. That's why we're doing this course, is to train you to reach out to those you love and to help them to recognize the inconsistency of their worldview.
It's atheism is a form of insanity, if I can say it in love.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not doubled but tripled amongst college students. Right. It seems to be the cool thing that if you're in college or if you're in high school, you are an atheist. Well, I mean, it doesn't say the scholarly scientist has said in his heart there is no God, or the brilliant biologist has said in his heart there is no God, or the marvelous mathematician has said in his heart there is no God. It says, no, the fool has said in his heart there is no God.
Right.
All right, let's go to our first clip.
For the most part, we are not shown the evidence for there being a higher power. If we were, I almost guarantee that almost every atheist would immediately agree to there being a higher power.
Personally, I don't think that's his true hair color.
I don't know. It could be this new evolving thing happening.
So what do you think of what he said? Do you think there's no evidence?
It blows my mind that in light of everything that we see, and you're going to see in the course of the video how Ray demonstrates that God has given plenty of evidence. The evidence isn't the issue. Right. Because even when we go back to the time of Christ, right, the men that guarded the tomb, the soldiers that were conscripted to guard the tomb of Christ, knew that he rose from the dead. And it says that they were paid off by the Jews to say that his disciples came and stole him by the night. So it's not an issue of evidence, because Romans tells us that everyone's been given evidence. People are without excuse. God has made it manifest in them, right? But it's suppressing the truth in our
right. You know, in fact, in that same text that you brought up there, it says that they saw the resurrected Christ, yet still some doubted. Right.
Even when Lazarus was raised from the dead, some went off to whine about it to the Pharisees. Yeah. So it's crazy.
Yeah, you know, it's not a matter of evidence. In fact, one of the questions that I like to bring up to an atheist is, if I could answer all of your questions to your satisfaction, where you are happy with the answers that I give, would you be willing to bow your knee and to worship God? And how do they respond?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm exaggerating here, but an atheist seeks evidence like a man who's dying of thirst seeks salt. Yeah. He really isn't interested in it, you know, because he drinks iniquity like water. He loves darkness, he hates the light. And so we've got to find a way to reach them, and we believe we've got it.
Yeah, and you'll see as the course progresses, you're going to come to realize why it is that people really don't grasp what they're seeing as truth. Yeah. All right, let's check out what's next.
Do you believe that book could happen by accident, that nothing produced the color pictures in the book, that red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet ink fell from the sky and formed itself into those beautiful pictures?
You know, this actually blew me away. This whole thing began with me taking one of my books to a local college to make a video for my publishers. But when I did the argument, could a book happen by accident, it really did something. It's basically the teleological argument. It's just the watchmaker, that everything has design, and yet bringing DNA into the equation just stopped people's mouths because DNA is synonymous with science. Do you think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that there's a greater form of evidence that God has given mankind than creation. And if you're going to go even deeper, you're going to find the smoking gun, it's going to be DNA evidence. And we must keep at the forefront of the conversation, though, that evidence, as great and as compelling as it is, it's never going to bring a sin-loving sinner, right, to the throne of the cross, at the place where Christ is at. And that's where we're going to get into that. That's where the gospel, it's going to lead us. It needs to bring us to that place.
Often you see someone say, yeah, there is design, and it's like, yeah, they really don't want to admit it because it puts a damper on their sins.
Yeah, and my question, Ray, is when did that click in your mind to transition over to DNA? Because in some of our other productions, you kind of got an idea on the spot. Was it through something someone said, or was it just in the midst of that, you just decided to transition?
Scotty, whom I have been preaching the gospel with almost every Saturday in Huntington Beach, him and I drive there it takes about 30 minutes, and we talk about DNA and how incredible it is. And he's educated me about DNA because the guy's very sharp. And so it was in the forefront of my mind, and I don't know why I went to DNA from the book, but I'm certainly glad I did.
And what was the glorious kind of random book that you used?
Oh, Made in Heaven. Yeah, deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an amazing thing.
Wow, that's wonderful. And look, we want to encourage you again to pay attention to how Ray is guiding the person through the logical steps. And these are the sorts of things we need to do when we're witnessing. It's a conversation. Yeah. It's not a script, but yet he's getting them to think. And you can see the expression on the people's faces as Ray is reasoning with them. That their wheels are turning, and the Lord can enlighten their understanding. That's our hope. The Spirit will do it, but you just speak the truth.
It's so true. One of the things that I've noticed, even recently, I had a conversation with a professor at a local university, and he said, up until this conversation, I never thought that Christianity was a tenable position, that the worldview even made sense.
Right.
And in the midst of this conversation, you've shown me that Christianity is intelligent.
Right.
Here's a college professor who's been teaching for the last 17 years.
Oh, right. Yeah, and that's why it's important to study to show ourselves approved. It's important to be workmen that aren't ashamed and that give ourselves over to the most important task of being ambassadors of Jesus Christ. All right, let's check out the next clip.
Couldn't happen, could it?
I don't think so.
It'd be impossible.
It would be like saying an explosion caused everything that makes a 747 airplane to all just come together by accident without some intelligent thought behind it.
That's a good point.
That's such an irony, isn't it? He's using the typical creationist argument, and he's an atheist.
Yeah, I want to scream, yes, you're getting it. You're tracking with Ray, Now take it to the next logical conclusion, I
just want to talk for a moment of how I met Richard, because he endears himself to us as you watch the movie or the film. Richard burst into our crowd. Scotty was preaching, and he was fuming. He was just angry. And the reason he was angry was because of the fact that he was angry that little kids were being molested and dying, and God was doing nothing. And he was an atheist because of that. So I took him aside. I said, "You're an atheist?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I interview you?" And he says, "Yeah, certainly." So he fumed. The fuming went down a little. We went out in the pier, and he gave me 30 minutes. And it was just so moving to hear him go from being super angry to saying, "Will I be bored in heaven if I make it?"
Right.
It was just such an amazing thing. So I said, "Do you want to meet Scotty?" So we walked back to where Scotty was still preaching. He finished, and then introduced him to Scotty. I gave Richard a $15 Subway card because I just wanted to show him a token of my love for him. I gave him our Audacity book, and we ended up praying with him. Wow. And so I don't usually cry when I pray, but whenever I think of Richard and pray, it brings tears to my eyes.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of atheists are surprised by that kind of love from a Christian. We've heard famous atheists even talk about your kindness and your love, and it blows them away. Again, that's a reminder that it's not our arguments so much that do the work. It's the Spirit of God by using his vessels that are manifesting the fruit of the Spirit and are witnessing. The Lord's bondservant must be, as 2 Timothy 2 tells us, all those things, patient and kind and gentle and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you know, we are definitely to be rich in good works.
Yeah.
You know, Ray, I've learned from your example over the years that, you know, when you go to a store, you're not necessarily going to get something for yourself, but you think, man, my brother, I think he would really like that.
Yeah.
You know, and your light is shining among men. They see the good works, and what ends up happening ultimately is it brings glory to God in heaven.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's never a day off for an ambassador of Jesus Christ. We are ambassadors wherever we go. Witnessing isn't just something we do. A witness is something we are. And as our light shines and then we get the opportunity to share the gospel, we do. The problem is people take it to the opposite extreme sometimes, and they never say anything. I'm just going to let my light shine. Let them see I'm a Christian by my nice smile.
See it in my eyes.
Right. So it's important that we have that balance. Yeah. All right, let's move on.
Do you believe DNA happened by accident?
No, I think that it developed over the course of many, many millennia of evolution and development.
DNA exists in every living thing. Its origins don't matter. The fact that there is intelligent information tells us there must be an intelligent designer.
You know, despite the fact that there are millions of atheists around, I visiting universities, found it very hard to find them. I must have said to 500 people over a 3 or 4 month period, excuse me, I'm making a video on atheism. I like to interview atheists. You wouldn't be an atheist, would you? And people say, no, I'm not. And so what I did to try and find atheists is I started carrying around this. This is a double helix. And I thought, this is what a great idea. So I sent away for it. And the idea was atheists are supposed to be into science, and they'd recognize this, and they'd say, that's a double helix. It's a DNA molecule. And I'd say, an atheist can interview you. Yeah. Didn't work. So I got a sign. About this big. It says, pay money to atheists for interviews. And I sat in university for 30 minutes with a sign, feeling like an idiot, people walking past and reading it, not stopping. So I bent it up, put it in the trash bin, and just went and stood there. And that's when I met Haley. Wow. She just walked up, and I said, would you be an atheist? And she said, yes, I am. And I said, can I interview you? And she said, yes. And she was so sweet. Yeah. And so, and she starts off, she's not silly. She's obviously got the meat upstairs. And so she wasn't a kind of a silly girl. She was very intelligent. Yeah. So adamant, she wanted out of this world evidence, and she just softened with the DNA thing.
Yeah, she knew what DNA was.
Yes. Deoxyribonucleic acid.
We see that in another clip. But yeah, and the interesting thing I found in that clip is the fact that Ray asked Haley, do you think that DNA could have happened by accident? Her answer was no, right. But then she injected the element that atheists and evolutionists always inject, and it's time, right? Given enough time, anything could happen. But that doesn't change the fact that their view is it still is an accident, because it's random at its very foundation. In other words, there was nothing behind it. It just kind of,
It's the element, will the Mercedes evolve in my garage over 100 years? No. 1,000 years? No. 1,000,000 years? No. 100 million. Oh, it could. It could. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind as well is that we need to help them to see that. So ask questions, right? Mark, you've always been good at this. Coming back at them with a question.
Right.
In fact, oftentimes they'll kind of go down a rabbit trail, or they'll maybe start expounding on something, and you interject a question, and suddenly they recognize that what they're saying is faulty.
Why do you ask questions? I just did one then.
Why do you ask?
Why do you ask? Mark,
it's called the Socratic method. It's when you answer a question with a question. I do it all the time when people ask me a question, because I can't presume upon their motive. I was open air preaching recently at a university, and when I was all done, a young lady came up to me, and she wanted to have an answer to the problem of suffering and pain. So I could answer that one of two ways. Philosophically, here's the answer. Or personally, I come alongside, put my arm around, and go, hey, what's going on in your life? Right? So I asked, and what I was ready was, I had my guards up, because I just finished open air preaching, and I was ready to really duke it out. Right? The most common question, if God is a God of love, and He's so benevolent, why is there evil and suffering inside the world? So when I asked, why do you ask? She told me, I'm dying. Wow. I have only a couple months to live. My mom and dad are no longer with us. I have no kids. She's 29 years old. And it was at that moment that I said, listen. And I changed what I was about to say. She wasn't interested in philosophically me handling her question. It wasn't a question of logic. It was a question of loss. I'm going to lose everything dear to myself. Yeah. So we have to always ask, why? Why do you ask?
Yeah, you'll be surprised. And look, we're to be fishers of men, we're to have tact, we're to have wisdom. Obviously, we want to see people saved. But the premise for it is genuine care. We care about these people. So when we're asking the question, it's not just so that we can follow this technique.
Right.
It's so that we can really know who this person is. We can hear their heart. We can relate to them as someone who was once where they're at. And such were some of you, Scripture says. So it's important to do that, and they'll see the genuine love coming from you, and it'll break down the barriers. All right, let's see our next clip.
You an atheist?
I am.
What would you think of the mentality of someone who thought a physical book could make itself?
I think they'd be silly. Of course it can't make itself.
You know, the word isn't silly. The word is foolish.
Yes.
You know, the fool has said in his heart there is no God. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that when we present evidence to a non-Christian, a non-believer, they get to sit on the throne and put God on trial. And they get to determine whether or not any evidence that you present is admissible in the courtroom of their mind, and they get to determine if that evidence is any good, ultimately, to the final outcome.
Right.
Well, we have a problem there because the God, the judge of the universe, has already made the verdict, has already told us plainly the evidence that is needed is creation. It already exists. Right. So I like where you're heading with this, and I like where it's going to end up.
Yeah, and what often happens with atheists is you give them what you know is evidence, and they just push it aside, run back to their atheist site for some more to justify their own sins. So
yeah, because like Mark pointed out, the issue isn't really that there's a lack of evidence. The issue is that they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, like we've already touched on. And so when you start breaking it down, you see what happened happen. You see someone suddenly start to realize, yeah, exactly. Atheism is silly, in other words. And so you have to be careful because it's easy at a point like that, I think, to get the gotcha attitude. You don't want that.
Right.
You have to continue to be humble because you're not trying to win the argument. In fact, I think sometimes it's really important to preface that. A lot of times when we do open-air preaching, we'll say to people, look, I just want you to know at the outset, my aim in this is not to win an argument. That's not why I'm speaking to you. Look, we might spar in a spirited way in the course of this interaction, but know that I love you, I care about you, and I want to listen to you. But I just want to ask you to listen to me and just to think through this logically with me.
Right. You know, I was speaking at a secular university in Pennsylvania, and after I was done lecturing for an hour, I did Q&A from the students and the faculty for an hour after that. And I said, hey, listen, I really just ask one thing. Let these be genuine, legitimate questions when you come up to the microphone. I'm not your enemy here today because I have a differing worldview. If you want to have a dialogue, let's have a dialogue. Let's agree to disagree and then go get a cup of coffee afterwards. And I saw earlier in the week that me being there was the top trending item on richarddawkins.net's website and on Reddit's website as well. So all these questions are coming up. Ask Mr. Spence these questions. And all these questions started coming up. And I go, look, you can do that. You can try to stump me. That's not going to be very difficult to stump me. But know this, when you ask the question, if you come out and you start attacking me in it, it's not hard to flip the question around and ask you to give an account for the same thing. You know, God, he's against, and then fill in the blank. And you say God is evil because of fill in the blank. And you have a problem. Because you have no objective foundation, no standard in order to put God on trial. Genocide, God commands genocide. What's wrong with that, with your worldview? You should be applauding God for getting rid of the weaker races. But no, you put God on trial. It's not the way it should be.
It's winning evolution. It's racist.
And it's as simple as pointing out their inconsistency, like Mark's saying. Atheists go crazy on genocide, right?
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Wasn't it survival of the fittest? The greater killing the weaker that brought you to the point that you are now at the top of the evolutionary ladder?
Right.
It's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, or who's to say that it's wrong if there's no objective standard of morality? So point out the inconsistency and do it gently and lovingly.
Yeah, and so often atheists will say, you know, God killed everyone except 8 people in the Noahic flood. Just say, did he really do that? If they say yes, then they're saying God exists. If they say no, it's no big deal.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see how much offense they take at something they don't believe even happened. But again, they're pushing away the truth. All right, you persevered with us through this first session. We're on our way now to the second one. These are going to progress, so hang in there, and we'll see you in the next one.
So I just hand them one of these?
It's the easiest way to share the gospel. You do this every week?
Yeah.
All right. Heavenly Father, I just pray that you guide us when we go out and share your gospel tonight, Lord.
I was born in a Christian family. We went to church, and everything was fine and dandy in my life until something happened to me and my family when I was in high school that completely shattered my faith in God and turned my life upside down. My dad wanted to open up a business with his best friend. My dad's best friend ended up being deceitful about certain parts of the business deal. It went sour, and we went from being well off financially to basically having absolutely nothing in the bank account in a matter of days. To make things worse, my dad began to behave really strangely. And the psychiatrist at the time diagnosed him with a disease called delusional schizophrenia. We checked in my dad to a psychiatric hospital. And so when I didn't see God healing my dad, when I didn't see God giving us the finances that we needed, I said, you know what? Everything that I've been taught about God in the Bible is absolutely wrong. And so very quickly, I embraced atheism. So when I went to college, I was in college as an atheist. I embraced evolution. I was partying. And so after a while of going through this, I began to search. For, hey, what's the meaning of life? Why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing in life? I was watching a movie with my best friend, and we left the movie theater. We saw that there was a group of people. There was one lady that came up to me. She said to me, "Have you received your $1 million today?" And I said, "What?" And she gave me something. It was a piece of paper. I didn't think too much of it, and I just took it and I put it in my pocket. Now, in all honesty, I had planned on waiting just until I was out of view, and I was going to throw that piece of paper in the trash. I didn't really care about what it said. So when I got back home, I was taking out my stuff, and lo and behold, this piece of paper came up. And I began to read it, and it said, "Here is the $1 million question. Will you go to heaven when you die? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life." And so when I read that, my heart began to pound and I began to get goosebumps. And it was as if my whole life flashed in front of me. I went and I just kneeled beside my bed and asked God, "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I've done so many wrong things against you." God used living waters in my life to bring me to faith. And he used the $1 million tract specifically to bring me to Christ. This woman that gave me that tract that night, she had no idea how God was going to use it in my life. She had no idea that just a few minutes later, I was going to be in my room, on my knees, crying and asking God to forgive me for all the wrong things that I had done in my life. And now, by the grace of God, I'm able to take that same tract and also bring other people to faith. Truly, God uses it to make a difference and to usher so many more people into his kingdom.